Chapter 3. Resting against the pack, Dave looked at his watch and set the alarm. He then drifted into a light sleep. Waking to the beeping of the watch a little more than an hour later, Dave connected the little Yaesu to the improvised antenna and pushed the third of his preset frequency buttons. Today was a Thursday and an odd-numbered day of the week, and he checked the frequency in his head, ensuring he was on the right push. As noon approached, he again put in the earpiece and turned up the volume. Just as his watch turned to 12 o'clock exactly, he heard the squelch break on the frequency. Marveling at the technology that could produce a watch that kept synchronized time so well, he listened to the music playing in his ear. The gentle tune of Greensleeves broke through, a version played by a folk group using words from the mid-1880s. The female singer's soft voice called to him, "Away, away, come away with me, where the grass grows wild and the trees grow free. Away, away, come away with me, and I'll build you a home in the meadow." Dave sniffed. It was a beautiful rendition in ordinary times, and given his situation, very poignant. A voice came on the air. Sua sponte. The transmission ended. Dave leaned back as if a heavy burden had suddenly been lifted. Sua sponte, the motto of the Army's 75th Ranger Regiment, was one of the prearranged code words that indicated that all was well back at the ranch. He knew his wife and sons were safe, and so were his friends. Sua sponte, of their own accord. The Ranger's other motto was "Leave no man behind." If he was in serious trouble, sick, injured, on the run, he could answer with codes of his own, indicating approximately where he was and what was wrong. They would monitor the frequency for half an hour after playing the message, and the alert frequency was part of the retreat's preset scanning. Hearing this, his friends, some of them anyway, leaving behind enough staff to ensure the security of their families, would come for him. Mutual aid was one of the things they had agreed upon long ago. Can't pay rent this month? We'll help. Sick and can't shovel your walk? We'll be there. It all worked out, and in this case, Dave's investment was paying off. Dave settled back, the camouflage painted rifle sitting across his lap. Looking at the rifle, he smiled to himself. What would old Sergeant Chadwick say about this? He wondered, drifting back to sleep. "McGrath," the voice ordered. "Yes, Sergeant," answered Dave, his eyes on the ACO-clad NCO at the front of the room. "Since we're covering the basics, kindly explain camouflage cover and concealment to the platoon." "Yes, Sergeant," answered Dave. Camouflage disguises something, to make it look not at all like what it is. Concealment is something that hides you from observation, and cover does the same and provides protection against small arms fire. "That's right, college boy," said the sergeant. "You win a cookie. Breaking up the form of you or your equipment is camouflage. Take your rifle." He held up his M4 carbine. "It's just straight lines and all black. Pretty good color, but it still is a large black straight line when all is said and done. What we're going to do today is rectify some of the problems this presents to us in a tactical environment. Pratt," Sergeant pointed at a red-headed soldier in the front. "That box on the corner of your table. Pass out the contents. One color per 2 men." Pratt lifted the box and began passing out small spray paint cans to the assembled men. "This is called Beauflage, and it's a removable paint sold to hunters. We'll be using this today on our carbines. Hunter might need this to sneak up on Bambi, but your game is harder. Bambi doesn't use mechanical ambushes and RPGs on Joe's six-pack. Later, we'll be constructing camouflage for your rucks and your sorry asses. I don't care much for pretty equipment. When you put your ruck down on the field, I want you to run a 70% chance of losing it in the bush." The platoon chuckled. Sergeant Chadwick was a hardcore trooper. Having served most of his career in Special Forces, he was doing a 3-year stint in a line unit to perfect his troop leading skills. The platoon was, for the most part, glad to have such a colorful and knowledgeable NCO leading them. At the very least, he kept them interested. He came up with so many wild schemes the platoon would have stuck around just to see what he came up with next. I can't train and lead a guerrilla battalion without having time training and leading troops, he explained when he reported to Lieutenant Moore the previous spring. Lieutenant Moore agreed and was happy to have him. An ROTC graduate, Lieutenant Moore was also unique in that he had served for 4 years as a Marine infantryman before college. Also, he was smart enough to know his own limitations and had hence learned quite a bit more about leadership and command than any other lieutenant in the brigade. After painting their weapons and receiving Sergeant Chadwick's approval, several men had to redo their weapons to Chadwick standards. He had Pratt start passing out woodland pattern ruck covers and 4-foot square sections of camouflage net. Using black electrical ties and paracord, they attached the netting to their pack covers. They then cut the net to size, and using strips of burlap from rolls, quote, "I have the NSN for everything," Sergeant Chadwick explained deadpan when Lieutenant Moore asked where it had come from, unquote. They added detail to their new covers. This covers what Dave had on his pack now, although with a slight modification. "These covers have been treated by the esteemed Mrs. Chadwick," said the sergeant. She was always the esteemed Mrs. Chadwick, never a name, with a water repellent, as has the burlap. "You nasty smokers had better not set the burlap on fire, boys, or I will make you regret it." His malevolent smile reinforced his word. "We'll be doing a smaller cover for your boonie hats too, so leave some burlap, Williams." Looking at Williams, Dave could see that he had a cover that looked not so much like a camoed pack cover as a lump of burlap the size of a hay bale. Williams smiled apologetically and started removing material. "That's better," said Chadwick, tying more burlap onto his own pack cover. Their first field problem after the camo session proved the worth of the camouflage. They were crossing an open area when they heard helicopters. "Down!" yelled Chadwick. The men dropped beneath their covered rucks and peered up at the Black Hawks coming in front from their left. Flaring, the birds touched down and quickly disgorged their cargo of heavily laden infantrymen. "Psst!" hissed Chadwick. "We're recon. No one fires unless fired upon. Pass it on." Under the roar of the idling UH-60s, the men passed the word. Suddenly the engines changed noise, and the 4 Hawks applied power and lifted off in a cloud of dust, leaves, and grass. The LZ soon filled with the sound of an infantry platoon moving, the jingle of rucksacks being put on, the sound of squad leaders issuing commands for movement. Heading out through the tall grass, the squads formed into wedges and moved out, right through the recon platoon. Even though he knew it was only training, Dave felt tension as soldiers bearing heavy weapons and packs walked through his platoon. After the platoon entered the wood line, Dave let out a sigh of relief. The camo had worked. Over 40 men had just walked over and around 18 men lying in the grass, and not one had been spotted. After calling in a report of the size and direction of the just landed platoon, the recon troops split into their 3 teams and 1 command group and continued their mission. Camouflage, concealment, and staying still had just made a great impression on Specialist David McGrath. It would one day save his life. Dave woke from the cold. The sun had set, and he could see stars shining brightly above him in the clear fall air. He drank some water and nibbled on a maple nut cake from an MRE. Finishing, he took the cover off his pack and reversed it. He had, some time ago, had his wife Sandy sew green cotton onto the inside of the pack. He could then reverse the cover, and it would appear to be a commercial pack cover and not present an alarming appearance to the gentler citizens of the hiking world. Dave felt that he would create less of a scene if he were noticed walking through suburbia than if he had a large burlap-covered tick on his back. He had removed the cotton flannel shirt from his pack and put it on over his chest pouch to hide it from casual observation. His rifle would present more of an issue. Taking his pack, he left the little hiding spot and crawled out of the thicket. Taking his bearings, he consulted his compass and set out. Before long, he came to the first of many houses. They were all dark, some with a little light showing through the curtains, but it was apparent that this was a no-power zone. He made his way through the backyards, carrying his rifle on his left side up close to the side of the pack. Eventually, he came to the cemetery he had noted earlier. Staying near the wooded edge of the property, he paralleled a small stream and left the security of it only when he came to a school. He paused on the embankment and conducted what had once called a security call. Listening for anything unusual, he only heard gunshots once, 3 of them, from a very long ways off. What did give him cause for concern was the car that turned into the parking lot of the school near the gym. When the door opened, he saw it was a police cruiser. The 2 officers in the car went to the door of the gym and knocked. Light flowed forth as the door was opened and the officers entered the gym. Darkness returned as the door shut, and the sound of the metal fire door hitting the jam echoed across the ball field like a bass drum. Dave was up and moving before the echo was gone from his ears. He wanted to move now while the cops were inside. He made his way along the edge of the field and then ran across the street and into a backyard. Taking cover behind a shed, he rested for a moment to catch his breath. He then rose and continued through a seemingly endless maze of backyards. Several blocks away, he almost died of fright as a shed door opened in his face. Stopping and backpedaling, he backed around the corner of the building as a man holding toilet paper in his hand walked across the backyard and entered the house. Dave slunk around to the back of the shed and was suddenly assaulted by the ripe odor of human waste. Outhouse, he thought to himself. Had things really gotten that bad so soon? Well, he reasoned, if the water treatment plants were without generators, water would be rationed. Only those with artesian water would have enough. He skirted several houses that had dogs in the yards and had to change his course several times to avoid large stockade fences. He finally sought cover behind a house that was somewhat secluded from its neighbors by trees, apparently being built near the center of a large double lot. In fact, the house was large enough and old enough to have been here before the area was developed into a tract of soulless cookie-cutter colonials. Taking shelter behind a garden shed, Dave dropped his ruck and drank the last of his water. This was going to be a problem. If the water was being rationed, how could he fill up? The sound of a door slamming set his adrenal gland into overdrive. Grabbing the FAL, he rolled over into the prone position and aimed at the house. The door opened and slammed again. The wind, he thought. He looked at the house. Several windows were open, with curtains blowing gently out of them. The door itself, the screen door, was askew on one remaining hinge. Abandoned? Dave watched for a half hour, and then quickly opened his pack to get the water bladder. Unclipping his butt pack, he slung it over his shoulder on a length of paracord and headed for the house. Pausing at the back stoop, he examined the door more closely. It definitely had been broken in. Whoever did it may be inside, thought Dave, sleeping something off. Well, no gluts, no glory, he said to himself, and quietly climbed the concrete steps. He entered the kitchen to find it untouched, except for wood splinters on the floor where the jamb had given way. The living room and bedroom were trashed, however. In what was apparently the master bedroom, one section of wall had been exposed, plasterboard all over the place, trampled by a number of feet. What the heck, thought Dave. The dressers were open and the contents were scattered all over the room. Dave looked around. The wall in the hall was covered with family pictures. A young man in a sailor's uniform, the same sailor in the uniform of the young girl in her wedding gown, both smiling. Children turning to adults, must be grandchildren too. Returning to the kitchen, Dave noticed a yellow paper attached to the table with a thumbtack. Using his red filter light and lying on the floor to avoid exposing the light, he read the notice. All information on the pre-printed form. Dave saw the details were filled in with the same block printed handwriting, and the date was yesterday's. Official notice, Department of Homeland Security, FEMA Region 1, New England. Notice of seizure. The property located at 13 Maple Terrace is hereby under seizure of the Department of Homeland Security for the crime of willful possession of unregistered assault weapons. List of items seized. M1 carbine, serial number 1503117. Japanese rifle, serial number 456329. 45 caliber pistol, U.S. property marked, serial number 67644, stolen government property. Ammunition, 3 cans. Unintended consequences, seditious material. Patriots surviving the coming collapse, seditious material. Boston's Gun Bible, seditious material. Various seditious material found on hard drive of iMac computer, serial number AG456E3410. All items seized as evidence. In accordance with Federal Law, Section 15, Para 55, the premises, materials, and persons residing at this residence are remanded to the custody of representatives of the International Assistance Forces, United States Region, for trial. Please contact your local FEMA representative or ISAF headquarters for the return of any property that is not legally held by the owner, residents, or representatives of said premises. Dave crumpled up the form and dropped it to the floor. Well, they went and did it all right. Rounding up old people for a few war trophies. Unbelievable. Dave sat for a minute. Get some stuff and get out, said the little voice in his brain. Dave got to his feet and turned. He opened the fridge and looked inside. His eyes were drawn to a bottle of soda and a 2.5-gallon jug of spring water, almost full. He removed the jug and the soda and put them near the door. Finding nothing else of use in the fridge, he went through the cupboards, finding some cans of tuna, beef stew, canned meat, and various veggies. Justifying his actions by the fact that the government.org now owned the contents of the house, he stuffed as much as he could into the butt pack, grabbed a few apples and bananas from a basket on the counter, and knelt by the door. He heard crickets in the backyard and determined that it was safe. Leaving the shelter of the house behind, he quickly retrieved his pack, donned it, and continued through more backyards.